Hello and welcome. I am Light and this is my channel. Today we're going to talk about real Candyman murder. Before we get started, I have a couple things to say. I am in a hotel. Therefore, there could be background noises that there isn't normally, like the refrigerator with a motor that just seems to get louder and louder the more I acknowledge that it's there. You know, traffic outside, whatever. Doors slamming, you get the idea. Please excuse that. Now what we're going to do is talk about this. And unless you have been living under a rock, and, that's fine, no judgment, then you have probably heard about the New York City woman and TikTok user, Samantha Hartzell. Well, you might not know her name, but you probably do know her videos. And what her videos are is she discovered that there was a hole in the wall behind her bathroom mirror and went to go explore it, which is, well, it depends on how you look at it. Brave or ridiculous. And what she found was a completely abandoned apartment. A whole other apartment behind hers. Behind her bathroom mirror. Inside of it was some garbage bags, some empty water bottles, but they didn't find a person at the time. She did find some way that you could exit the room, and she did lock that and then report it to the building manager, which might have been my first route. Although if you're living in New York, you might just want to knock that wall out and take that extra room. Keep that rent low, get the extra space. Anyway, we're going to talk about how this was commonplace back in the early 1920s when apartment buildings were being built. What they did is if two apartments shared pipes, they would leave spaces between the apartments so that if anything happened on the electrical or whatever, they could get in there without actually having to enter the apartment. It's a smart idea when you think about it, I guess, but the reality is that anybody who knew about these entrances, anybody who worked in these apartments or told anybody else, well, they would know that you could access apartments through the bathroom mirror. And what could go wrong there? Well, I want to tell you. Ruthie Mae McCoy had some mental health issues. She was the type of person who you see talking to themselves as they walk down the street, or who starts to curse and rant at a complete stranger on the street. So when she called 911 to report that someone was coming through the medicine cabinet of her Abbott Homes apartment, she could have been hallucinating. But she wasn't. On April 22nd, 1987, Ruthie Mae McCoy, who was 52 years old and also known as Miss May, lived in Chicago's ABLA housing projects in a section called the Grace Abbott Homes. She had lived on the 11th floor in Unit 1109 since 1983. At 8:45 p.m. on that day in April, Miss May called 911 to report that an intruder had throwed the cabinet down was trying to get in through her bathroom medicine cabinet. The dispatcher wasn't quite sure what that meant, so she dispatched a car at 8:47 p.m. to a disturbance with a neighbor complaint. A complaint that was not high priority. It did not come with a possible break-in, in fact. So at 9:02 p.m., no officers had yet arrived. At that time, a neighbor called to report hearing gunshots from apartment 1109. And another neighbor reported nearly the same thing at 9:04. Police arrived at the scene at 9:10. They knocked on the door, but they didn't get an answer, so they asked dispatch to call Miss May's phone. Through the door, they could hear the phone ringing repeatedly with no answer. They tried to get a key from the project manager's office, but they weren't there. They were hesitant to break down the door, so they left at 9:48 p.m. On April 23rd, the next evening, a neighbor of Miss May's called 911 about her. Miss May would often stop by the friend's apartment on her way in and out, but she did not show up that day. Having seen the police at apartment 1109 the night before, the friend was worried. Police and Chicago Housing Authority security responded and still received no answer at the door. Security guards discouraged the door from being broken down because of a possible lawsuit. Now, as a side note, 2 years ago, my mother-in-law, who has dementia, had not been heard of from in several weeks, almost 2 months. We do not live in the same state as she does, and we had called police several times to ask if they could do a WellCare checkup on her, which they would do. They would drive by. They would call me and let me know if there was a car in the driveway or not, which there wasn't ever. But they would not break down the door. They said that in Arizona, that is against the law for them to break down the door even after someone is basically missing for 2 months. So that is a very possible reason that the police were giving them. It doesn't make sense, but it is how it is. So the police left again. Then the next afternoon, on April 24th, the friend went to notify the project office of the situation. They responded by drilling into McCoy's locks, where they found her in the apartment, dead from 4 gunshot wounds. This woman had been laying there for 2 nights, even while the police were standing outside of her door. As it turned out, the ABLA projects had a weird architectural anomaly in that certain apartments connected to one another via a pipe chase behind the bathroom cabinets of each. The design was intended to provide easy access to plumbing fixtures if the maintenance was needed. In some cases, apartments above and below each other connected as well. Unfortunately, this also provided easy access for burglars and other characters, as the bathroom medicine cabinets were easily removed from each end. So one could simply remove the cabinet from the wall of the apartment they were in, crawl through the pipe chase, and push in the cabinet of the unit they were trying to access. Break-ins via this method had been going on at the ABLA apartments for some time, to the extent where residents would put furniture in front of their bathroom doors or tie them with a rope to keep them closed before they went to bed. Yet for some reason, they didn't understand what she was saying when she said someone was breaking through her medicine cabinet. Miss May's apartment, 1109, was connected to 1108, from where it was ascertained that the intruders had come from that night. 1108 was being rented at the time, but it was not occupied by the actual renter on record, which was a common practice at the time for drug dealers to rent apartments and then sublet them to the people who were actually doing the selling. Or sometimes they would squat in vacant ones to carry out their activities. Eventually, there were 2 suspects arrested. Fellow ABLA resident Edward Turner, who was 19 years old, and John Hondras, who was 22 years old. They were charged with murder, home invasion, armed robbery, and residential burglary. The main witness against them was a man named Tim Brown, who made a statement the day after Miss May's body was found. He said he and Corey Flournoy had been hanging out in 1108 for most of the day in question. Then they were later joined by a Ron Coleman, Hondras, and Turner. Coleman showed Hondras how the adjacent apartment could be entered through the medicine cabinet. Coleman and Flournoy left soon after, and then it was just Brown, Hondras, and Turner. Brown witnessed Hondras and Turner break in to 1109 through the medicine cabinet, and then he heard several gunshots. Turner came back holding a TV, and Hondras had a rocking chair, and then they left the building. They returned 2 to 3 hours later to retrieve the shell casings. They said in a statement later that they went through the door because after they had shot Miss May, they had left the door open, which, as we know, is not true because the police had gone and could not get in to the apartment. So within an hour of the police being there, standing outside, knocking on the door, they returned to clean up the place. Due to lack of physical evidence, witness testimony was basically all the police had to go on. It was obvious in the days between when Miss May was killed and her body was found that the perpetrators had returned to the apartment to clean up. Only 1 bullet and 1 shell casing were found, which was obviously inconsistent with the 4 gunshot wounds. And apparently, these people are not so smart. They left with 3, not 4. The apartment had been wiped down of all fingerprints, and Miss May's phone was gone when the police had definitely heard it ringing while they were standing outside the door. Her bathroom cabinet was nowhere to be found. She possibly didn't have a sink there any longer. The cabinet in apartment 1108, however, was secure by the time the police found it, which only meant that it had been nailed back into place. There was a trial where accusations were thrown around about who stole what and who wiped down what and who was inside and what time it happened, and it was just a mess. They were having no difficulty admitting that they had gone into the apartment and stolen her belongings, which had later been found. But there were so many people involved, so many drug-using people involved, that the story of any one of them never stayed the same. It was confusing, it was jumbled, and in the end, there was nobody convicted of killing Miss May. However, if you've seen the movie Candyman, you probably already know about those secret hallways, those attached apartments, those mirrors. If you've ever looked in one to say Candyman, you just never know if someone is looking back from the other side. Thank you for coming to my channel. If you would please Give this video a thumbs up and share it with people who are also interested in true crime stories. We have a lot of content on this channel that ranges from paranormal to missing 411s, true crime. There's something for everybody. So if you'd like to be subscribed, please go ahead and do that. If you'd like to be notified when my content goes live, go ahead and click that bell. Good night.